Hello, our guest today is Bryan Cole. Bryan's a Milford Town Meeting member and one of the organizers of Citizens for Responsible Cannabis Retail Sales.
That's correct.
That's
Welcome.
a mouthful.
Thank you. We know it's a mouthful. We're working on it.
Oh, you would, yeah.
No cute acronym.
Oh.
No, not yet.
Oh,
I tried, but we couldn't
could come up with one?
No, we couldn't.
So basically, in September, Milford voters are going to vote on a referendum question on whether or not to allow the sales of retail slash, some call it recreational marijuana as allowed by the statewide referendum of a year ago.
Yes.
And you are in favor of allowing retail sales in town.
Yes.
Okay.
You can answer more than yes and no. You can.
Well, it was a yes. Well, thank you. I'm a little nervous. I've never done
Oh,
this
hey,
before.
listen, this is just called TV. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
And any mistakes, he just wipes out.
So,
I don't believe that.
so I guess the question is,
Sure.
Why?
why?
Well, we feel that our group feels that marijuana should be regulated like alcohol. We feel that marijuana can be better controlled and better regulated if we work with legal businesses who have an incentive to control its sale, to control its purity, to make sure it's not sold to minors. Same way we sell alcohol in liquor stores all over town.
Okay, and I'm going to ask some questions that
Of course.
provoke discussion.
Please.
In Colorado,
Yes.
they've gone through this, and one of the effects, one of the things that's happened is the car accident rate has gone up. The accident rate has gone up, and I've talked to several police officers, and I said, "Gee, if it's legalized in the state, which it is now,
Yep.
how do you determine if someone is under the influence driving?" And currently, there are no tests.
That's true.
So, how do you deal with that?
So I'm glad you asked that question, Al. I have 2 points to make. And the first one is, regardless of whether or not we allow retail sales in town, we're still going to have that issue, right? Because it's still going to be legal. People are still going to make bad decisions. But did you know that for alcohol, dry counties have over 3 times the rate of DUIs than, I don't know, let's call them wet counties, counties that do allow alcohol sales? The theory is that you go drive to wherever the bar is, drink too much, and then come back, and that's the DUIs. So having the establishments closer to home might cut down on that.
Eliminate that. Well,
Yes.
Interesting.
Mitigate that.
Now Milford is already zoned.
Sorry?
Milford has already passed zoning
Yes, that's correct.
restricting if retail establishments are licensed, restricting them to the same very limited locations as medical marijuana clinic. So even if they are allowed, you're talking maybe 1 or 2 locations in town where they'd actually fit into the zoning.
Right, and I've heard people say, oh, we don't want medical marijuana, we don't want,
Marijuana.
right, exactly, we don't want marijuana stores on every corner. And I think you have to look at it, again, like alcohol, where liquor licenses are allowed, liquor stores get permits, but they're not everywhere because the market, frankly, just doesn't support them anyways. Even if
And actually, under the law, the most there could be
right, of course.
would be 6 to 8. If you go by the liquor license formula, depending on what number of licenses you're counting, you couldn't have more than 6 or 8 in the town, and
Sure.
I agree with you.
Right.
I don't think you could support it.
No, and even those 6 or 8 liquor licenses, right? They don't just give them to any guy off the street. You have to go before the Board of Selectmen. You have to put your hat in your hand, and you have to really sit there.
You have to go before the ABCC.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the
liquor license.
Liquor license
yeah,
is selectmen, the state ABCC, there's going to be a state cannabis commission.
Sure, there's all these hoops that you have to jump through to
Right.
show that you're a legitimate person and you know what you're doing with this stuff and that you're going to be responsible with it.
And what about the fears, though, that a lot of people have, especially, they don't want this anywhere near the schools.
Okay,
They're afraid that children will smoke marijuana.
okay,
And that will lead as a gateway drug to other abuses.
okay. Well, let's tackle the gateway drug issue first, and then we'll come back to the other one.
Okay.
We'll come back to the children. I'm a little confused about the gateway drug topic myself. I've tried to do some research to prepare for this, obviously, and some people, and it's not clear whether marijuana is a gateway drug. Yes, a lot of people on what I'll call harder drugs, cocaine, heroin, and so forth, did start taking alcohol or marijuana first,
Right.
as Amy Leone will remind you. But again, alcohol or marijuana. And keep in mind that the CDC says something like half the country has tried or used marijuana at some point in their lives. And so just because something happens first, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's caused.
A valid point.
Especially, I'll interrupt, especially now as they're discovering that a lot of actually have brain chemistry that makes them addicts.
Well,
Sure,
well, that's
and in
number
fact-
one. That's,
go
that's
ahead.
number one. Number two is also people with mental issues use it as self-treating.
Sure.
So, okay, so
Use marijuana.
use marijuana, use
Okay.
all kinds of drugs. They use that kind of stuff for self-treating.
Sure.
The other thing that's changed over the years, not that let's put it this way. Back in the 70s when people smoked marijuana, was a different, it was a,
And only in the 70s.
okay,
The
but
potency has changed.
the potency has changed dramatically. Now, one of the benefits to the change in potency is they've bred out some of the things that cause the paranoia. So the quality of the marijuana is better,
Sure.
but much stronger than it used to
Are
be.
you speaking as an expert, Al?
I'm just suggesting, just suggesting.
I want to jump in on that. Well, you made another point.
Let-
I'll come back to that
let's
later.
go, let's go back to the kids, though.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
okay,
But
let's
before we do that, I just want to, the potency thing has come up before. And I just want to point out again, this is where having legal resellers, as opposed to somebody growing some plants and selling them on the
That
side,
is
would
amazing.
actually be a huge benefit,
Because
right?
you
I
could
don't know.
actually
Would you-
regulate the potency.
Yes,
Right.
or they have an incentive to have it labeled. If you went into Craft Fruits, right, and they told you their beer was 6%, but it was actually, but sometimes it was 20 and sometimes it was 3, how often would you go back? Probably not very.
No, you're right. You're absolutely. It does give control on the potency and the quality
Absolutely.
and the impact
Well,
of the drug.
Yeah, what I hear is that, the parents are afraid of the gummy candies.
Right. Yes.
They're afraid of the fact that little Johnny and Jeannie might smoke marijuana. Not that half the high school kids aren't trying it already.
I wasn't
But
going to say that,
they're-
but I'm glad you did.
I'll say it. I have a 24-year-old son who proudly tells me,
He's still in high school.
not Milford,
Okay.
but proudly tells me that of his entire class in 4 years in high school, he was probably one of the 2 or 3 kids who did not smoke pot.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, listen, when I was in high school, I was so naive, I used to sneak behind the shed and do nothing, but that's not the point. You're right in that kids are going to try marijuana anyways. But in fact, in states where legalization has taken place, you do see reduced rates of teen marijuana use, in part because it's harder to get access to it, because legal resellers have a stronger incentive to check IDs and to keep it out of the hands of minors. Now, as to the gummies and as to the sort of marketing to children aspect, I don't know if you guys saw this, but in the
It's
the
forbidden in
compromise
the
bill.
law.
Yes, exactly. It has the Massachusetts Medical Association released a statement this week praising the new bill and and especially the way it eliminates marketing to children.
Right, I've read the new law, and it absolutely eliminates it. In fact, I just can't see a 10-year-old getting on his bike, riding up to Bear Hill and saying, you know, give me a gummy, here's $1.
No, right, exactly.
'Cause
It's
it's not
much
gonna
more
get
likely.
sold to 'em.
Right, it's much more likely that if there's nothing in Bear Hill, the 10-year-old's going to get on his bike and go a couple houses down to the older kid who's got 12 who's got 12 plants that he's just grown on his own.
Which
and selling out
people
of his
still
basement.
have to remember are allowed under this law.
Yes,
Right,
of
and
course.
12 pot plants can grow a lot of pot.
Again, this isn't my area of
Yeah.
expertise.
I mean,
but
all of us could go plant our legal pot in our backyards right now.
I mean, I'm terrible at gardening, but yeah, no, I see your point.
Anything I've ever planted has died.
Uh-huh. Oh, yes, it's a long family legacy of brown thumbs over here.
So the real dilemma that we face as a community is really whether or not the issue is whether or not to sell in storefronts. That's really the
Right,
question.
it's not a question of marijuana or no marijuana.
It's a question of sales.
It's a question of
Do you
control.
want it sold in your town? And people have said, you know, they don't want Milford becoming the destination town in the area for it, but if you can't have more than X number of shops by zoning, you know, what do they expect that the guys who are pouring $10 million into the Kmart Plaza
Yep.
are going to make that the pot warehouse? Come on down, toke up?
Right. Heaven forbid we have people come and spend money at legitimate businesses. But that notwithstanding, it's not like there's no one else in the area that's going to do this. Franklin has already started taxing it. They have a 2% local tax on it already when they pass their zoning restrictions. I talked to a bunch of people from Blackstone, tried to explain our situation to them, and they were stunned because there's no resistance to it in their town.
Well, in fact, Mark Shane, who recently resigned from the Finance Committee, when he was on the Finance Committee, advocated very strongly to get that local tax revenue in.
Absolutely. Look, and again, it's not a question of are we going to have marijuana or not. It's is the town going to benefit from it or not.
And do you want it in the town? I mean, the town voted narrowly.
Well, narrowly, sure, but
Yes.
7,000 people came out and voiced their support for it. When was the last time we had 75% turnout in a local election? Cro-Magnon days?
You're
What?
not going to have it. Plus, you have the fact now that the legislature has changed the law,
Yeah, oh yeah.
and the governor is expected to sign it very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
the wording of the ballot question, which people are already absentee voting on,
Ballot's already in.
has to be changed
Of course.
to match the new law.
Right.
And it's a much more complex question than the paragraph, because if you look at it, the actual zoning has to be in the question. So zoning is very difficult for people to understand.
to begin with.
So you're now going to have the zoning chart and everything in the question. You
That's
have
gonna
the
be a hell
question
of a
of what
ballot.
happens to the people who already voted absentee.
Yep. I mean, but it's just, to me, that just shows you how rushed this whole process has been, right? People, I mean, Town Hall has come together and put this together despite, again,
Well, I don't think, I disagree with you, Rush, and I'll tell you why.
okay,
You need a town meeting to do the zoning.
sure, which they did
And-
in the spring.
They did in the spring. The date to take license applications is still next April
Okay,
of 18.
Mm-hmm.
That only leaves the October town meeting to do any zoning you want before that. So they put in a stopgap zoning at the May annual town meeting. If this question is voted on and is approved to ban retail marijuana,
Mm-hmm.
you still need to redo the zoning at the October town meeting to do that.
but it's still, we still have the election in September, which, by the way, when was the last time we had an election in September?
Well, that's why they're holding it in September, so that you
That
can
all
do
the-
something
all the
before the
steps get
October
taken.
town
It's a
meeting.
timing
I
issue.
suppose. It's still, I mean, we're still in a situation where we have a ballot that's been, frankly, sort of thrown together, and we better hope the governor actually signs that bill. If he sends it back and says, I want A, B, and C changed, we're going to have to wait on that before we're going to
You
get
probably
more
have to
weird.
cancel the referendum and change the date.
And, you know, I go out there and we talk to people and we hear the same question over and over again, which is, wait, why are we doing this? We voted for this already. What are we
You're
doing now?
doing it because, A, the question last November
No, no.
allows it to be done.
Of course.
And B, it tells you, now that more parameters are known, do you want it with these parameters?
Sure, but every time there's a state house change to the marijuana statutes, are we going to have to go out and have this, relitigate this fight over and over again?
No,
I'm
I
telling
don't.
you, my point is just that the people of the town are confused. They don't follow this stuff as closely. They said, they think, you know, did we vote for this? Did we not vote for this? Okay, let's move on. And we've seen, and you know, you've seen this in some of the Man on the Street articles in the Daily News. People who said, well, I didn't vote for it personally, but it's here now.
Well, the
And they think it's
argument
over.
that's being used is people voted for it in the state, but not necessarily in their town. And this determines whether or not it's in the town.
Sure, and I've heard,
Now, I'll tell you, if that provision wasn't in the referendum,
what, the,
to have the local referendum,
yes.
it is in the new law. So people can hang their hat on that. But the fact of the matter is, you have an awful lot of people in the town who are unhappy that it's passed. And I think they're the ones driving this local referendum.
Of course. And they tend to turn out more, and I mean, let's be honest, the 75% of people that turned out for the presidential election, it's going to be a very different group in all probability that's going to turn out for the special election.
Probably.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's going to be a large, and that's sort of what we're going up against here. You know, I know they say you can't fight town hall. Well, here we are anyways, so.
Well,
Well, you can.
you can, if the popular issue is one that's opposed to what town hall said.
Sure, and I think the votes in-
Don't forget, the anti-casino people were against the majority of the selectmen. You had 2 selectmen vocally in favor of a casino
Sure.
and one against.
I
And it was defeated by a 60 to 75%
right.
margin.
Right.
I think that's an interesting analogy because, again, the casino is something. If the casino referendum does not pass in town and we don't build a casino here, there's not going to be one for a little bit. And so if you don't pass the casino referendum, you're not going to have any issues associated with having that in town.
Right, which, by the
If-
way, I'd like to point out, had it passed, it would be open right now
Sure.
in town.
Oh, no, right.
So,
I wonder if they would sell, but that's not the point. If the marijuana referendum does pass and the ban is enacted, I always have to make sure I get my yeses and nos right here.
well, just say if the ban is enacted.
Sure, if the ban is enacted,
Because I honestly can't remember, does yes allow them or does no allow them?
it's-
You'll have to read it when you.
So it's,
Absolutely.
you know,
We have-
somebody's going to have to tell people going in the door,
Uh-huh.
a yes vote means
You support
you
it.
have it,
Yep.
or it means you don't have it.
yeah. We have little buttons that say nope for dope. I don't know if that helps. We might start passing those out.
Okay.
But the point is that
If sales are allowed.
yes, if sales are allowed, we're still going to have whatever consequences there are. Or no, excuse me. If the ban is enacted, we're still going to have whatever consequences there are. Again, this is not
Because people can go to another town and
they
buy
can
it.
go 5 minutes down the street, or they can use the dealer they're using now, frankly. Because the nice thing about, or one of the things about having the legal sellers is you've seen a reduction in the black market, right? Because if you have a legitimate business with controlled potency and controlled quality
You're
and all
assuming that the same result is going to happen with marijuana that happened with prohibition.
that. No, I'm assuming the same.
Well, when prohibition was
Sure.
it was in fact enacted, the black market.
Well, we're in
No, 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 no,
prohibition
no.
now.
No. I'm not assuming. Right, that's all true. But I'm not. My analogy is not Al Capone. My analogy
No,
is,
I'm saying-
is,
no, I
is Colorado and Washington. And
No,
Nevada and so forth.
but I understand that. There are a couple side issues that the questions that come up that I've had people ask me. Is there's a couple issues. First issue is unless they change the banking laws,
Yes.
there is a significant amount of cash in these 6 places, assuming, which increases the risk of a lot of different things. And the other one is, the question is now, and it really is not necessarily whether or not marijuana is legal or illegal or whatever, but one of the things is it's illegal to smoke in any facility, any place inside.
Okay.
Now what happens is that with the increased support of marijuana, people are going to say, gee, I medically have to smoke it, so am I exempt from the no smoking ban? Those are interesting questions of
That's
people.
interesting.
Well, that exists now with
What?
medical marijuana. That theoretically, that problem would exist right now.
Absolutely.
Because I can get a prescription for medical marijuana. I can go to a clinic, it's grown in Milford but not sold in Milford. I could go to a clinic, I could get mine, and I could say, gee, right now in this studio, my glaucoma, my migraines are acting up. While we're talking, I'm going to light up a joint and
Is that what those plants are over there?
and do
The
this.
buds aren't there, though.
So I think that's an argument people throw out, but the law says no.
Well, I would say two things. I would make one point for both questions, really, which is that a majority of Americans, some 60%, the last poll I saw, support legalizing marijuana. Given that, it's only a matter of time before the banking laws are changed.
That'd be my, that has to change.
In fact,
It
Bank
does.
of America has said it will take marijuana trade money.
There you go. I mean, we
If,
just
one
left
of,
Bank of
if the
America.
too big to fail bank is doing it,
Sure, one of the too big to fail banks. But so that's the one thing, right?
yeah.
The popular support is there. It will not take long, I don't think. More and more of these issues are coming up. You're going to start to see the groundswell of support for
And
at
what'll
least a
happen, I think, is-
normalization nationally.
And to Al's point, I think what will happen is, just as they changed the law to ban e-cigarettes in public places,
Sure.
they'll add marijuana cigarettes.
Sure, and e-cigarettes actually lead into my other point, which is as the market grows and stabilizes, consumers are going to want different products. If you have medical marijuana, say, and you're in a restaurant and your glaucoma is acting up, there might be a pill for it or an oil or something that you can do instead. So you're not
Most
lighting
of the medical marijuana is not smoking.
Exactly.
Right.
It
And
is
so,
inhaled or orally taken.
sure, and in that case, you don't have to worry about the non-smoking laws.
Right.
Correct.
So those, there are a lot of questions that come up because people, non-supporters,
Okay.
have this kind of question. Gee, it's going to require, you're going to have cash in these places.
Sure.
It's not supported by banks, so therefore we're going to have increase in police support. So, those are all the byproducts, the second and third level
Well,
stuff that
but the
comes in.
town, given the way the town zoning is, the town still has to grant a license. The town can require security systems, just the way the state requires them now in medical marijuana facilities.
Facilities, correct. You
And
have
of
to-
course-
That issue was actually brought up at the last zoning board hearing, where they wanted to put a medical marijuana clinic down on Coles Plaza. And the security issue was put to bed right there, that it's not an issue.
Sure. And I think, and again, we have places, as you said, in town growing medical marijuana, and you would think that those.
That's a very secure facility.
Exactly. They're not. I mean,
No,
they
that-
know
no.
that the people
Secure
that would
to
be
the
opening
point
these
that
places.
if I drive past the front gate, they've captured my car ID registration tags.
Which is another question for another day.
Right, that absolutely, it throws a whole nother level of questions on the table
Sure.
that are actually worth pursuing as time goes on. Now, the next question, I would assume that you probably talked to the chief about this issue, or you've had some input from the chief?
Not yet. Why? Have you?
Oh, I'm just curious.
No. Well, but I mean,
They
again, I
haven't
think that-
arrested you guys when you've done your smoke-ins.
Well, I didn't smoke anything. I don't know what you're talking about.
Some people were smoking.
Yeah, that's true.
But, they were dumb enough to give quotes to the paper as they held up the joint. So if the police want to arrest them, they have the...
Bingo.
No comment. But again, I mean, look, this is something that the police have decided is not. There are more pressing matters in town to focus on, I think. And I think.
Yep.
I think that, and I don't want to speak for the police department, but I assume they would appreciate having the freedom to pursue other things rather than trying to stop every guy who's got 5 pot plants in his basement.
Right. No, I would understand that.
Well, I would even argue, I mean, do you really think that they have the people power to
No.
go and check everybody's backyard and count the number of plants?
Well,
To
exactly.
see if you're one over what the law allows?
Yes.
I mean, they already overfly the state with helicopters looking for the heat signatures of large growing areas.
Yep.
So, I mean, are we going to spend time on that, or are we going to spend time eradicating opiate addiction?
Right, and I've seen, by the way, that opioid use rates do go down in states where marijuana is legalized. Opioids, antidepressants, speaking to your earlier point about... So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, my biggest thing, and the opponents of retail sales say they're for medical marijuana,
sure.
which is fine. My biggest thing is, if there are people who benefit medically, whether they're cancer patients or migraine patients or whatever you have, glaucoma patients, they benefit from medical marijuana, then I want to see the easiest way for them to get it.
Absolutely.
And if we're up to me, the local medical marijuana clinic would be on Prospect Street, right next to the Dana-Farber Brigham and Women's Cancer Center.
Right, that's a good
Make
place.
it real easy for the patients.
For the
it's
cancer
yeah, right.
It's not zoned for that, and we don't have any sales in town, but that's how I would do it, because I would treat it like any other drug. And to quote Attorney John Fernandez, when he was representing the medical marijuana clinic trying to go on Coles Plaza, you could have CVS go in there or Rite Aid go in there
Sure.
dispensing opioids that are far more damaging than medical marijuana.
Exactly.
Now, I don't have a stand on retail sales of marijuana, because quite honestly, I don't use it. Never did anything for me. I tried it.
Sure.
So I don't really care.
Well, did you hear that? No.
Yeah, well, you're also talking 40 years ago. So,
You tried it, but you didn't inhale, right?
oh, I inhaled.
The dilemma is that it has a connotation, has for years.
Absolutely.
So
And
that's the
Well,
real
and
issue.
you know where that connotation came from, by the way.
Well, but before we get into that, I just want to point out that, with these type of things, there is a chilling effect, and you will see people who legitimately need it for medicinal purposes sort of shy away from it. I've heard of doctors who aren't willing to prescribe it because they don't want their names on some list somewhere.
Absolutely.
I have friends who keep track of Milford residents going back and forth to Brockton because that's the only medical dispensary around. Or at least that's the one they like the best or whatever. So, but again, the sort of more we keep it stigmatized, the more we're going to make it difficult for the people who need it. And the more we're going to be fighting, and the more we have that sort of uphill battle when it comes to things like opioids, where it could serve as an alternate.
And I haven't come to any conclusion on this issue. I'm still
Sure.
waiting to see all the facts and see what happens.
The election's September 19th.
Yeah.
Wait, which camera?
The dilemma, all of them were.
Oh.
The dilemma is I absolutely support medical marijuana because absolutely anything that relieves any kind of illness is absolutely worth doing. Absolutely. And I would suggest that what's your recommendation to have it close to a place where you have other medical treatment makes sense to me.
Of course.
Because then it's easy access and people have to drive all over the world to get
Although
to
I believe hospitals are specifically one of the things we're supposed to stay, medical marijuana dispensaries are supposed to stay at least 200 feet away from.
And there is a logical reason for that. I can also understand that. I can understand why it's that way. The dilemma is that just like cigarettes, cigarettes can be controlled by the local boards of health.
Sure.
Is that same issue going to come to the table with once it's medical marijuana set up? I mean, for example, Milford the Board of Health could regulate and say, okay, nobody under 21 can buy cigarettes in the town of Milford.
They did.
I was going to say, isn't that
That's happened here.
They also do give the local, gave the medical marijuana facility a license, the Board of Health in Milford.
Okay. So what happens is that the Board of Health now becomes much more involved or engaged in that issue also.
Sure.
The dilemma is that typically boards of health sometimes are more part-time, which means that their control is not going to be as consistent.
As consistent as
someone who's full-time regulation, someone who,
well, sure, but who would that be in this case?
well, in the case in boards of health, elected boards of health, it can be people who are much more conservative. So what you'll have is people opposed.
But if they're elected, then the people have the right to elect
That's
somebody.
correct, but typically people don't realize the connection. So
Well, then people are going to have to start
they're gonna
realizing
have
the
to
connection.
learn it. Yeah.